Ed.
Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all Helping Parents Heal meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate-led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone, and once again, Jeff, thank you for being here.
Yes.
Oh, my pleasure. It's neat to see a lot of familiar names and faces on here, so I love that part of it. I'm going to pull up my screen here and we'll share
Wait
that.
just 1 second. Before you do that, let me just quickly introduce you so that people will know a little bit more about you. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, please do.
Just so that people know how wonderful you are. After suffering a widowmaker heart attack at the relatively young age of 42, author Jeff Janssen sought answers to life's big questions like, who am I, why are we here, and what happens to us when we pass? His way to close brush with death put him on a serious quest to discover solid and soul-satisfying answers. Jeff's research led him to the stories of near-death experiences, NDEs. After studying over 3,500, he synthesized their findings into the 10 life-changing lessons from heaven so that he and others could benefit from their profound wisdom. Because learning about the life review had such a profound impact on his life, he then wrote Your Life's Ripple Effect. Jeff has also written a book for kids who have had a loved one pass called What You'll Learn in Heaven. And he has shared these life-changing lessons with numerous groups, including parents who have had a child pass as part of Helping Parents Heal, which he did recently, formerly incarcerated women as part of a new way of life, members of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS, and people from all religious backgrounds and faiths through his Soul Peeps Discussion Groups. And you can learn more about him at www.lifelessonsfromheaven.com. And without further ado, I'll let you go ahead and get started. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Janssen. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I know we talked a while back on one of these, and I'm really looking forward to the conference. So that will be a great opportunity there. But yeah, as Elizabeth said, I really got intrigued by near-death experiences, and it was more by force than it was by will. First of all, I'll give you a little background here. As Elizabeth said, I mean, I didn't have a spiritual NDE, but I had a physical near-death experiences where I almost, had in essence, a 99% blockage of my widowmaker artery. So when you get 1% away from death, then it's definitely something that you start to think about things that, I probably didn't think about. I was 42 years old. I have a wife and at that time, a 10 and 12-year-old kids. And I went in and I was feeling this chest pain, but I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just heartburn. And they put me on a stress test. That's not me there. That guy's got more hair, but I did find a picture of a guy doing a stress test. And I'm definitely getting, the full heart going and the pain rating down the left arm, and they get me off and they said, Mr. Janssen, you have to have a nitroglycerin tablet, lay down. We're either going to be doing open heart surgery, or if the blockage is in a good place, we might be able to give you some stents. So 42 years of age, focused on the job, focused on the family, and now I'm coming, that close to death. So it did provide me with a much needed wake up call. I can remember going out to my car, getting ready for this catheterization that they were doing, and thinking, I don't want to go. I'm not ready to go. I've got a 10-year-old daughter that I want to walk down the aisle someday. And just kind of really for the first time fighting for this life and understanding just how precious it was. And fortunately, they did put 2 stents in my heart that I have now. That happened almost 11 years ago. And fortunately, I've been healthy since. But all these questions flood your mind, which probably have flooded all your minds as well. Why are we here? And where do our kids go when we do transition? And is there this heaven, or is there this hell? Some of us, I grew up in a Catholic religion, so I had a lot of talking about a heaven and a hell. So I really, when this happened to me, thought, okay, is that stuff for real? Would I have gone to one of those or the other? And I started looking at, I don't know if I fully appreciated the life that I had. And did I really achieve my life's purpose? I was successful in the business world, but as I found out, that's not how we're going to be evaluated when all is said and done. There's going to be a different evaluation that we're going to look at in terms of how we lived and how we loved. And then just trying to think about, what is this crazy life all about? So it's all these questions that, as many of you know, that are still going around your mind, that are reverberating back and forth. And what is this all about? So that really led me to looking at near-death experiences. I had read, or I'd picked up Raymond Moody's book, but I hadn't quite read it. But when this happened, of course, this is something that I wanted to take a look at. So what's kind of happened over the past several years now, almost, over a decade, is I've looked at least 3,500. I'm probably starting to approach 4,000 near-death experiences. And obviously they fascinated me, and the insights that people gained when they go to the other side and what they learn were just miraculous. So they really helped me. So a lot of you, I know Elizabeth mentioned IANDS. I've been a member of them for 10 years. I've gone to basically, I think 9 out of the last 10 conferences. Many of you are probably familiar with the NDERF site, the Near Death Research Experience Foundation. They have about 5,000 sites or 5,000 accounts on there. Lots of YouTube videos, which I'm sure a lot of you have watched, a lot of NDE YouTube videos, and then tons of books that I've read as well, from Jeffrey Long and Mary Neal, who I know will obviously be at the conference. And then there's a picture of me with Jeff Olson and his wife at the first Helping Parents Heal conference. Elizabeth was nice enough for that very first one. I just felt compelled, like I, for whatever reason, need to be here. And I'll talk a little bit more, because I had actually been learning from Shining Light Parents. I had put together a book called The 10 Life-Changing Lessons from Heaven. And these are the things that I'll go into depth about in the presentation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those there. But interestingly, good old Brian Smith, who's obviously one of your caring listeners, along with Ty, does a great job. I met him through a Zoom kind of work thing that we were doing with another author in a book that she had. And I thought, you know what, Brian really seems to have a good perspective on life. And I had just put together a manuscript of my first book, The 10 Life-Changing Lessons from Heaven. And I said, Brian, do you think any of the people that you're in contact with would be willing to do a 10-week discussion group on this? And Brian was nice enough to gather some of you who are probably on this call right now. And hopefully it was mutually beneficial for everyone. There were so many great insights that I got from Shining Light Parents about one part of the book talks about forgiving people. And one of the parents said, you know what we really need to do sometimes is forgive ourselves. So many of us hold ourselves accountable for our child's transition, and the biggest person we need to forgive sometimes is ourselves. So they gave me a lot of great info and helped me put that book together and hopefully have even more impact than it would have. So these discussion groups were just amazing because I think people were learning a lot from them. I was learning a ton from them. And we had real conversations. We had really real raw conversations about how could a loving God do something like this in our lives? Where do these hardships come from? Why do they come? How do we learn from them? And, one of the biggest questions that I heard over and over again, and I'm sure is one that a lot of you ask, where did my child go? I know they're still somewhere, but where is it that they went? And are they okay? Are they okay? Where are they? Is somebody taking care of them? Is somebody looking over them? How are they doing? And then last but not least, am I going to see them again? Are we going to have some kind of reunion when it's my time to go? Are they going to be there to greet me? So it's all these questions that I had, that you had, that really sent me to near-death experiences. People who've been to the other side and came back with some really enlightening views of life and death and the other side and adversity and all these different things that we struggle with to deal with here. They had amazing insights and they were really, really helpful. So that's why I got so intrigued about them. That's how I've gotten involved with helping parents heal. And one of the things that came over and over again from myself and a lot of the parents who were going through these groups were these questions up here. Number one, I wish I knew these 10 lessons. I wish I knew that we're supposed to love unconditionally and live fearlessly and accept non-judgmentally, all the things that I'll be talking about. I wish I knew these insights earlier. And I think for a lot of you, if you've been involved with helping parents heal for a while, some of us are in middle age or later, and we're like, oh boy, I wish I knew this stuff when I was in my 30s, or I was in my 40s or 20s, or even as a teenager. I wish I knew this stuff so much earlier. So that kept going through my mind. And then I heard a lot of parents say, you know what? I wish my kids could understand these things. It would make their life a little bit easier. It would ease some of the grief that they might be experiencing. So I tended to hear that over and over again. And it takes me a while sometimes to figure some things out. So that took me a little while to get that going. But what I did just recently is to try to put together a book that took all of these insights from 3,500 near-death experiencers about what happened to them and what they learned, and tried to put it into a book or a resource that would be helpful, especially for young kids, whether they've lost a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a pet, you name it. For a lot of kids, they struggle with trying to understand and grasp all these things too. So what I want to do is share a lot of the near-death experience lessons that I learned from looking at all these near-death experiencers, show you guys what I learned from that, and then try to put that into a resource, as I said, that would be helpful for kids. And what's interesting, I know one of our moms on here, I'm going to keep her confidentiality, but I know she shared it with her dad recently, and her mom had passed away, or her dad's obviously spouse. And she said, you know what, with Grief Brain, this was one of the kids' book was probably the best thing for him because it was short, it was to the point, and it was succinct enough that somebody with Grief Brain can actually wrap their heads around rather than a big 200-page book and trying to read that. So it was neat to hear that not only is it helping kids, but hopefully it's going to be helping adults as well. So I want to share a bunch of these insights that I hope will comfort you in this process. And that's really what my next slide is going to, is the things that NDEs tell us about death provide us with a ton of comfort, hope, and healing. And I'm sure that's why Elizabeth and Irene have a ton of near-death experiencers and mediums for the conference so that they can share their wisdom and insights with us. But we know, in essence, kind of where they go. We know that they're more than okay. And we know that we're going to see them again based on what we hear from all these near-death experiencers and mediums. So I want to share some of these insights with you guys here that hopefully will provide a bit of comfort, hope, and healing in your journey and your process. So number one, we hear from lots of adults, and obviously the near-death experiencers that you guys will have will be adults, but there are millions and millions of kids who have these experiences as well. This is one from a kid named Cecil. He said, my brother and I went swimming. We had a problem. I tried to get him out of the water, but in his panic, he pulled me under several times. We both drowned. He died and I came back. I can remember it all like it was yesterday. Just as I could no longer stay afloat, a strange sound like ringing in my ears started. A peaceful feeling came over me. I felt my spirit come out of my body. A long way off, there was a pinprick of light. I moved toward it slowly at first, then faster and faster, as if I were on top of a train accelerating. Then I stopped and stepped fully into the light. So here is an example of a kid having a near-death experience. And as part of this, what I decided to do with this book is tell it from the perspective of a kid. And I was aiming for like around a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, named her Sophie, which, as many of you know, is for wisdom. So I have a little bit of underlying messages there. But millions of kids do have NDEs. And what's great about kids, especially the real young ones at 3, 4, 5 years old, they're great validity to this near-death experience, because no adult probably has sat them down and said, okay, if you ever have a near-death experience, you're going to talk about a tunnel, you're going to talk about a light, you're going to talk about all this love. They aren't going to do that. They're just going to talk naturally from their experience, and the same things that they experience as a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old kid are the same things that adults are experiencing. So it is a great validation that these experiences are real. So I introduce Sophie, and she comes in and says, basically, I'm sorry to hear about your grandma. I know you're probably really sad, and that's totally understandable, but she is in the most amazing place. And Jake, who's one of the boys who's sad because his grandma has died, says, really? How do you know? Because I was there, said Sophie. Where? Jake questioned. Heaven, Sophie said excitedly. Seriously, you mean there is a heaven? So she's going to relay her experience to him about what happened. And obviously, we've got to have some kind of illness in her case, at least for this near-death experience. And she talks about she got really sick last year. Doctors and nurses tried all kinds of things. It just wasn't working. Things got worse and worse. And I actually thought I was going to die. And obviously, with her experience, she does have this near-death experience. And what happens with most near-death experiencers here is they rise up. They feel like they're coming up out of their body. Sometimes it's out of their head. Sometimes it's more out of the chest or the solar plexus, but they feel this separation of their spirit, their soul, their essence coming up out of their physical body. This is Lynn, a child near-death experiencer. She says, the next thing I knew, I was floating around the ceiling looking down on my body. I floated into the waiting room where my parents were. My father had his head buried in my mother's lap. He was kneeling at her feet, his arms wrapped around her waist, and he was sobbing. My mother was stroking his head, whispering to him. This scene shocked me, as my father was not prone to showing emotions. Once I realized they would be fine, I felt myself pulled into a horizontal tunnel. So here's a kid talking about them lifting up out of their bodies and being able to basically move around the hospital room. And those of you who have read Jeff Olson, and I'll have his quote coming up, know that he had that experience. And my mom was one. I was with both my mom and my dad during their passing. And that was a really sacred yet sad experience as well. And for my mom, before she passed, she did say, I heard doctors talking down the hall. And she said, you got to be really careful, because I could hear all those things. And they were far down the hall. They weren't just outside the door. So I think she had a bit of a near-death experience. My father had a heart issue. You can see the stuff runs in the family. When he was 54, he did have a near-death experience. And it's one of my big regrets, because it happened, a long time ago for me, and I wasn't really into NDEs. I'm like, okay, well, I believe you, Dad. He talked about this warm, enticing light, but I didn't ask him really much more other than that. And I really regret that now, that he had that experience. But when he did pass at 57, I think I did have a bit of a shared death experience with him, because I could feel that peace that passes all understanding. It was one of the most peaceful things to watch him go and to be there as part of it. So I got some glimpses here and there. I didn't have the full near-death experience, but I did have some glimpses out of it. So those are some things that kind of buoy me and encourage me with all this as well. So Sophie obviously is up watching this scene. And as NDEs say, it's our spirit, our essence rises up out of the body. We often see what's happening down below us, whether it's in a hospital room or if it was a car accident or whatever it is. It's almost like you're up in the corner watching this. And as you're watching this, you're being filled with this complete joy and love and peace and freedom. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is really an amazing feeling. So that's one thing that I really want to share with you that is so consistent with near-death experiencers, is once they leave their body, it's just this expansion, this joy, this hope, this love. And what's really interesting is they're watching doctors scurrying around. They're watching, obviously, us as we grieve and we wonder what's going on. They're kind of watching all this and they're wondering, why is everybody so sad? I'm fine. I'm really good. I haven't felt much any better in my whole life. Why is everybody so sad? I'm really good up here. And as Sophie says, then after closing my eyes, all of a sudden I felt 100% better. I felt so much joy and peace, and it seemed like I was rising up out of the bed. I said, Mom, Dad, look, I'm up here. I'm okay now. But for some strange reason, they didn't pay any attention to me. I wondered why they couldn't see or hear me. It's as if I wasn't there. They just kept crying over someone in a hospital bed. I thought, that's really strange. Why are they so sad about that person in the bed? Who is she? And then for a lot of them, they see their body down below, but they're like, that's not me. This is me. Who I am, who I've risen out of this is my essence. And as I mentioned, Jeff Olson, who obviously will be part of the conference as well and is a great friend of mine, said, you know what? I came across a man lying on a bed. As I peered at his body, I realized it was me, or at least my body. I was me having this profound connective experience, but I was now looking at what used to be me, or my body. In that moment, I had the profound realization that I'm not my body. I was spirit. I was light. I was a profound part of everything and everyone around me. I was the true me, but outside of my body. So there's great validation about the essence of who we are lives on. Yes, we're looking down at a body down there, but that doesn't feel like me anymore. The real me up here is still alive, is still doing great. So as I said, NDEs will see their body down below, but don't feel like that's them anymore. And they often leave their body. And here's one for a lot of you, especially if your child suffered some trauma. A lot of them, so many of them say, I left my body before that trauma occurred. And I've even had NDEs say, even if they left their body early and it might look like their body's in pain, they're like, I was out of there. I was gone. Yes, it may have looked like I was in pain, but the real me, the essence of me was gone. And I think that's comforting for a lot of parents as well, is knowing that the real essence of who we are often leaves before that trauma actually occurs. And what's interesting, a lot of NDEs, when they first transition out of the body, they don't even realize they're dead sometimes, because they're like, man, I feel great. I don't feel sick anymore. I don't feel hurt anymore. I feel really good. And as all of them say, feel who they really are is not that body down there on the gurney or anything like that. And Sophie says, I looked at the person in the bed and she looked kind of strangely familiar. As I looked closer, she surprisingly had my black hair. And she shockingly had my face, but she looked awful. She looked dead. I thought to myself, wait a minute. how can that be me down there if I'm up here? So this is a common thing for a lot of NDErs as they try to figure out, I'm feeling great, I'm feeling fine, but the me I thought I was is down there on that bed down there. So that's one part of this as well. And then so many of you have probably heard of the tunnel. It doesn't happen in every situation, but it certainly is a common feature of a lot of near-death experiences. This is from Nadia McCaffrey, an NDEer. My attention turned towards a long, dark tunnel. At the end of the tunnel was a very bright light, and I floated to the opening. Once inside, I moved with what seemed to be an extraordinary and effortless speed and finally reached the light. So the tunnel, many NDErs experience going through that tunnel. That tunnel almost seems like it's alive itself, and it's drawing them toward the light. That's one thing that I do remember my dad saying, that there was this enticing light, like a moth to a flame, that you just want to go there and be there, and it's pulling you, and you're feeling these waves of love coming at you as you're going toward the light. So it is a very comforting kind of thing that we want to be there. We want to go there. And as Sophie says, I saw a large rotating tunnel and I floated over to it to get a better look. I could see at the very far end a tiny dot of brilliant white light. This light was so beautiful, warm and loving. I sensed the beautiful light was friendly, like it somehow knew me. So that light is something that we're just drawn to. It starts as a pinprick at first, but then as we move toward it, obviously gets bigger. And so many people talk about just brighter than a million suns and waves of unconditional love coming at you. Then to get to the other side, I'm going to use the term heaven here because, as I said, I was brought up Christian, but if you want to substitute afterlife, paradise, the other side, whatever works best for you. This is from Catherine I, an NDEer from the ender.com site. I stayed in an area of beautiful gardens. These gardens were greener than green is on earth, and the colors were vivid and rich. While I was in this space, I was weightless. I could access all knowledge I could think of. I also felt no pain. I felt as if I was more myself there than here on earth. And that's one of the big things that NDErs say is this afterlife is so real, so vibrant, so vivid, that it's like an amazing Technicolor, high definition HDMI screen kind of thing. Whereas here on life, for those of you who are older like me, you probably remember the old rabbit ears and the black and white TV that got maybe 3 channels if you were lucky. That's what the earth seems like in comparison to what the other side is like. It's that beautiful and that blissful. The 2 words, or the 2 phrases, I should say, that NDErs probably say the most when they recount their experiences. One is unconditional love, just an overpowering, overwhelming, ineffable, or hard to describe love that goes through every molecule of their body. They just feel so loved and cherished. And that's for everyone, as they say. So that's hopefully a comforting thing. The other one is the word home. Heaven is best described for them as a homecoming, a sense of home. Just the only word that they usually say is that I can just describe it as finally coming home after a long journey. So that to me gives me a ton of reassurance too, that going to the other side is going home. And they describe heaven as this beautiful, blissful, peaceful, otherworldly realm. And as I said, they see that everything seems like it's alive there. It's glowing from within. It seems like the plants are alive and the flowers are alive and the river's alive, all these different things. There's just life all over. And a lot of them talk about there are colors there we can't even capture in any way here on earth. And as Sophie said, I was blown away by the sheer beauty of this gorgeous place. Somehow it felt like I could sense every blade of grass in the meadow, every leaf on the trees, every petal on the flowers, and even every drop of water in the river. Everything felt so real and so alive. Everything glowed as if it had a light inside of it. So there is this beautiful, blissful afterlife that people talk about in their near-death experiences. So here's another one then, is also meeting a guardian angel, or if you prefer, a spirit guide. This comes from Cecil Wiley. An NDE, he said, my guardian angel, she was holding my hand, rubbing my arm while I was dying, telling me, it's going to be okay, baby, it's going to be okay. That was the most beautiful human being or entity I have ever seen or witnessed in my entire life. That woman was absolutely flawless, gorgeous, the most beautiful color skin and hair and eyes, and her touch was so soft and so gentle, just soothing. And you just knew who she was, that she's always been there. She's still here. And here's a really important point, and you've got one too. She's standing right beside you, holding your hand, and it's going to be okay. And honestly, that's one thing. Yeah, growing up Catholic and Christian, yeah, we heard about the angels and all that. But until I really started reading and listening to and experiencing these near-death experiencers, I really thought, wow, we do each have a guardian angel by our side. And it's something that, as I said, I didn't really consider until I heard this over and over and over again. And we all have, according to NDEs, our own guardian angel. And often they're described as these beautiful beings of light. And going back to Sophie here, I saw a beautiful, glowing, female-looking figure dressed in a shimmering white robe with feathery, soft wings floating toward me. This smiling figure was absolutely delighted to see me. Welcome to heaven, Sophie. We're so thrilled you're here. Wait, how do you know my name? Who are you? I asked my happily hovering companion. I'm your guide. My name is Allura. You can think of me as your guardian angel if you like. Every human has a guide for their time on Earth, and some people need 2 or 3, if you know what I mean, Allura laughed. So Sophie's getting a chance to meet this guardian angel of hers. What also happens too for a lot of NDErs is having what's called a life review. Susan Finley talks about hers. As I looked, I began to see my whole life go before me. At the age of 7, my life story was not extensive. So here's a 7-year-old kid having a life review, but everything was projected onto that screen. And I knew it was a summary of my life. I was shown key moments during my brief period on Earth, what I had done, followed by what I should have done. I didn't feel condemned, but I knew that what I was witnessing was true. So there are, even young kids will have a life review where we basically get an opportunity to look at the life we just lived. And we don't just see it from our eyes, but we actually re-experience it and live it. And we see it not only from our perspective, but we are able to see things from other people's perspective. In my life review, I'm going to understand however many people are on this right now. I'm going to get to understand what you were thinking as I was doing this presentation, how you were probably thinking about your kids, and did they have a life review, and who's their guardian angel, and all those different things that are coming up. I'm going to get to understand that from that perspective. And it sounds amazing, like how in the heck can that be done? But that's what we get to do in a life review, is we get to see the world how others saw us and how others experienced it, not to judge us, not to condemn us, but to help us see how the choices we made, the words we said, the actions we took impacted other people in a good or a bad way. And we understand the ripple effects of what we said and what we did, and not only how it impacts each of you, but hopefully you may feel a little more joy or a little more comfort after hearing some of these things that near-death experiencers have. And hopefully then that joy and comfort and peace might be spread into somebody in your family. And then they can then share that with somebody else. So as it says here, Allura somehow brought up 3 images from my life. You get to see a lot of these images of what have happened. She asked, remember that time you got the nudge to do something totally different, like surfing, and you ended up loving it? So she ends up bringing up these things to kind of convince Sophie that, yeah, she was a part of her life from day one. And there's one thing from Dr. Mary Neal, is it's important for us to understand our guardian angel is always with us. Mary Neal says there are angels around us, and we each have personal angels who watch over us all day. They help us, nudge us, and guide us in all sorts of little ways that we usually don't notice. Sometimes they'll push us forward, and sometimes they'll pull us backward. Always, they want very much for us to follow the path that has been laid out for us by God. My guess is each one of you on this call at some point got this nudge to find Helping Parents Heal. It may have been a nudge to go to the computer. It may have been a nudge from somebody else who's a part of this group, but someone gave you a nudge and you found a life-saving organization that understands where you are and provides you with these resources. You're also probably getting other nudges as well from your kids, from your angels, who knows? But the big point here is to tune in to those nudges and make some time in your life to be open to those things, because those nudges often lead you in a way that is going to help you grow and help you serve the world. My nudge to reach out to Brian Smith way back when, I can remember I was still walking on a trail and it was like, you know what, Brian guy seemed kind of cool. And, I know he's a part of Helping Parents Heal. Why don't you reach out to Brian? And I'm sure my angel or somebody was nudging me. It could have even been Shayna nudging me to say, you know what, reach out to Brian and see where this may go. And now I'll have the opportunity, obviously, to share with you guys now and share with those of you who are able to go to the conference in a month. So you never know where those nudges may lead you. Our guide is with us from birth until death. And what I want everybody to understand is no one ever dies alone. No one ever dies alone. That guardian angel is going to be there. Usually deceased relatives are there. The divine is there, you name it, but nobody ever dies alone. But here's another point with that as well that I put in with it. No one lives alone either. Sometimes you might feel really, really alone and that no one understands and no one gets you. You've got someone in a spiritual realm who understands you better than you understand yourself. So know that part of it. So as Allura's telling Sophie here, telling her, you know what, I have been with you since the very start. I've been with you since you were born and always will be. I've been there for every triumph and every tragedy. I was there when you took your first step, when you learned how to ride a bike, and when you made those back-to-back three-pointers to help your basketball team win the game. And Sophie, I was also there during your worst life moments, when your grandma and grandpa died, when your best friend moved so far away, and when you broke your ankle rock climbing and had to have surgery. Like it or not, I'm with you through thick and thin, no matter what. So understand that you've got that companionship and force with you. Now the light. That's probably the phrase that most NDEs use. They don't usually use God. They don't usually use, well, sometimes they'll use spirit or source, but light. And it's an unconditionally loving light. This is Andy Petro. The light also knows everything that I've ever done and will do, but loves me unconditionally. There is no fear, no judgment, punishment, blame, or shame, no ledger of good and bad deeds, only warmth, peace, joy, happiness, forgiveness, and love in the light. I'm one with the unconditionally loving light. So many NDEs talk about this unconditionally loving light that is there to greet them as they go to the other side. And as I said, it's often described as the light and exudes this unconditional love to everyone. And it's almost like we get absorbed back into it. And I used a phrase here for kids calling God or source the big guy. The big guy is our nickname for God, is what Allura is telling Sophie. Some of you humans call him God, while others call him the creator, Yahweh, Allah, source, spirit, etc. It doesn't really matter what you call him. He doesn't mind either way. The big guy loves you and everyone unconditionally, no matter what you call him, when you call him, why you call him, or even if you never call him at all. Another big concept that NDEs talk about is that our time here on earth is like a soul school, a school for us to grow and learn and develop. This is Gene R., an NDE. I was told that the earth is like a big school, a place where you can apply spiritual lessons you have learned and test yourself to see whether you can live what you already know you should do. Basically, the earth is a place where you can walk the walk and live the way it should be done. We may be taught on the other side what we're supposed to do, but can we live it under the pressures of the earth? From what I saw and heard on the other side, everything is about relationships and taking care of each other. We aren't expected to be perfect, but we are expected to learn during this process. So most NDEs, as I said, look at Earth like a boarding school for our soul. We're going to pack up, we're going to go away, we're going to learn all these lessons, we're going to take Love 101 and Patience 202 and whatever, and go and experience these things and leave this bliss and beauty of heaven to experience both the joy and pain and the light and dark and the triumph and the tragedy that's only available here on Earth. Everything up there or in heaven on the other side is blissful and beautiful. There aren't the pains that we have here on the earth. So it is a perfect opportunity for our souls to grow and learn, but ultimately we always get to go back home. And then Allura is telling Sophie, hey, heaven is actually your real home. You just go to the earth for a short period of time, especially compared to eternity. Here we often refer to the earth as soul school. You go to soul school to learn how to become a more loving soul. Just like regular school, you learn new things, make new friends, hear from interesting teachers, experience challenging tests, and then when it's your time to graduate from soul school, you come back home to heaven. So it's a different view of looking at our time here on earth as this soul school kind of thing. And then so many NDEs talk about reuniting with loved ones. Karen Thomas is not too far from me. I've got a chance to get to know here through the IANDS group here in Durham. Karen said during her NDE, there were enormous shade trees scattered around, and beyond the field was a small river about 30 feet across. On the opposite bank of the river was my father, who had died when I was 7, and my brother, who had been killed in a car accident when I was 23, and various aunts and uncles who had passed away. And even there were 4 people that I had never met in this life, but I certainly knew who my 4 grandparents were, even though they died before I was born. It was this huge welcoming, homecoming, and family reunion feeling. They were as thrilled to see me as I was to see them. So one of the, I think the most comforting things that NDEs tell us is we will often get to see our loved ones who have transitioned. And the thing is, they're happy, they're healthy, despite maybe being physically injured or having some issues here on Earth. They are fine. And what's interesting too is they often look younger. A lot of times they're in this kind of late 20s, early 30s phase that we tend to see how they look. And obviously they're excited to see us as well. And Sophie's saying, my grandparents, who she saw during her visit, my grandparents look so happy and healthy, even though the last time I saw them on Earth, my grandma had Parkinson's and my grandpa had his leg amputated. A little shout out to Joe Wilson there. But in heaven, they were somehow 100% happy and healthy and even looked younger too. We are so excited to see you, my grandparents gushed. Grandma and Grandpa, I've missed you so much. I thought you were dead. I sobbed happy tears of joy. Yes, Sophie, our physical bodies died, but our souls live on here in heaven. And then the last part that I think is really important is this essential purpose. Heather V, a near-death experiencer, and I want you to take this to heart. You, my dear person reading this, are important. Your life is critical. The love you have inside of you is beautiful and brilliant and is needed here on this earth. You can change this world with your love, which is entirely particular to you only. You have your own song. NDEs are absolutely adamant that each of us has an important, essential purpose that is needed to be shared here during our time here on Earth. And as it says, we all have this important purpose. We're here to share our gifts and help the world. And if we're still here, which is all of us right now, there is still some essential purpose of why we are here. And this is God now saying or talking to Sophie. Sophie, my precious child, I'm glad you like it here and I'm thrilled you got to see your grandparents. Know they are happy and safe here with me. And I give you my solemn promise, you will see them all again in heaven when it is your time. But my beloved child, your essential work on earth is not yet finished. There are still some important things I want you to learn, and you still need to fulfill your life's sacred purpose. My purpose? But I'm just a kid. I have a purpose, I asked. And yes, we all have a purpose, for who we are. And I want to share this NDE quote with you from Crystal McVeigh. She says, "Why do some people go up to the gates of heaven, but not pass through, like Sophie did in this example? I've come to understand that God uses all of us in different ways. He has a purpose for us all that is specific to who we are. My purpose involved coming back to earth, but others are permitted to enter those beautiful gates. When someone we love dies, it is painful beyond words, but only for us, not for them. I believe this is why God sends some people back, to share the message that heaven is real and he loves us and is waiting for us in our final home." And one of the last things here is I wrote this book first, and hopefully you love these pictures of heaven, these paintings of heaven as much as I did. And I had seen this woman's paintings online of angels. And I'm like, you know what? I've got to get this woman to do the illustrations because it's so important for a kid's book to have amazing illustrations. And I had written the book. I wrote it out in Tucson when I was out there. And I reached out to her. You can see her there, Karen Tarleton. And she was so busy at the time. She's really, really great. She does, international stuff. And she's like, I don't know if I have time. So I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this book if Karen's not going to do the illustrations for him. So about 8 or 9 months later, I had a trip out to San Diego with my daughter. And Karen lives out there. And I just reached out to her and I said, Karen, do you have a studio? Can I just come by and look at your stuff? And she's like, you know what? Come by my house. My house is my studio. And I'm thinking, oh, please, Karen, please say yes to do this book. And when I pulled up, she was outside and I said hello to her. And the first thing she said, you know what? I think I should do those illustrations for you. So I'm hoping Karen got a nudge from somebody as well with all this. And I'm so glad that she did those illustrations. And one thing here, and Elizabeth, I'm going to see if you want to share what this is. Some of you may see there are a couple names embedded throughout some of the pictures that are there. And Elizabeth, you want to share what she was able to do with that painting?
This painting is amazing, obviously, because she added the names of our kids. So many of the kids that Jeff has met through Helping Parents Heal are in this painting. Chelsea, as you see, is in the river there. And actually, that's a beautiful color. I always see her in blue. Morgan is written at the bottom left, and I think it's cut off
It
there.
might be out. Yeah, I did a real close up just to see, but we do have Susan down here as
Yes,
well from
Susan
Suzanne Giesman.
is Susan Giesman's, but Morgan's favorite color is green. So that was pretty amazing to see that in green. Carly is also in here.
Yeah,
I'm not
and
sure
she's lower.
image, she's lower than that, but
Yeah, and as I said, I did a close up so that you could see them. If I did just the backup picture, it'd be harder to see them, but they're embedded.
part of the most exciting thing of this painting is finding those names and figuring out where they were. It took a while, and it was so exciting that she was able to do that, and that you were as well, Jeff. And I just want to tell you, because throughout your presentation, people have been writing how much what you're saying has been helping them. And I think that one thing that is really beautiful, if we aren't able to do more than just this one, Carol wrote that she had her first Reiki experience on her son's 9-month anniversary. That was amazing, with a very strong physical presence. The messages I received were profound. He wanted me to know that he had never left me, that he loved me very much and was proud of what I was doing, and wanted me to continue moving forward. He would be with me every step of the way. He also wanted me to know that there was nothing more that I could have done, which is also very important for parents to know. As his mom, I felt I should have known the true depth of his pain. He was the biggest supporter of my photography. The following night, he appeared at the foot of my bed, looking at me while he was biting his thumbnail, as he always did. When I called out to him, he nodded and slowly dissipated into the soft white glow that surrounded him. This was his way of reassuring me that he had never truly left me. In 2 days, I have rebranded my photography journey to give back to military families and veterans, to honor my son and to keep his light shining. So grateful my son led me back to what I love. So what I wanted to just say about this is that through your book, you've also illustrated that all of this is true, that they never leave us, that they're always with us. And so many people have responded to Carol underneath her about how beautiful this is. But also, Angela says that it is so reassuring to hear the words, "No one dies alone." My daughter transitioned in her sleep on July 8th, and I've been struggling with feeling horrible about her being alone when she passed. I needed to know she wasn't scared and alone. So thank you, Jeff, for showing that she wasn't alone, and that we know that not only she wasn't alone, but she's with all of our kids now, just like this painting, they're all together. And anyway, I'm just going to see if there are any other questions. Do you have just a few minutes?
Yeah, I've got time for questions, and I'll put up there if anybody's interested, obviously, in any of those books. You can go online to Life Lessons from Heaven. And the thing that I'll be talking about, and for those who might be interested, we have our 10-week sharing groups where we get an opportunity to look at each of these lessons. So if people have any interest in that, definitely email me at jeff@lifelessonsfromheaven.com. So yeah, I've got lots of time for whatever time you guys have. I have time for any questions that people might have.
Well, thank you. So we have about 8 more minutes, and let's see. We have some people in the very beginning, but this was before you ever really went more into depth. Who were asking about if a child takes their life, if they end up in the same place. Maybe you could just reassure everybody that they do and that they are in the same place, if you could.
Yes. One of the things that I hear over and over again is that there is no judgment in heaven, that we are unconditionally loved. And when you think about it, unconditional love and judgment can't go together, because if you are loved, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter who you've hurt, no matter anything like that, if you are loved unconditionally, you are going to be accepted unconditionally as well too. So that is something that I've heard over and over again from NDEs, is that we all are loved unconditionally and accepted into the afterlife unconditionally.
And we are all home when we get there, every single one of us, no matter how we transitioned. And it's just an exit point from what I've heard. It has nothing to do with where we end up. And I also was interested in seeing Angelina is saying, do relatives that my son never met greet them, and do they know him, and vice versa? Could you answer that one for us?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, going off of what Karen said there, she was able to see grandparents that she never met during her time on Earth, but was able to understand those are my grandparents. And I think what a lot of people kind of talk about is there's an energy recognition on the other side, that there's just a knowing. You don't have to kind of meet people or say, it's just a knowing, an intuitive knowing, or a kinship that's there because you recognize the energy, even though you may not have formally met them while you were physically here on Earth. So I think that even goes back into other ancestors, and who knows how many generations that might go back.
That's beautiful. So everyone is telling you how reassuring you're being. Becky's asking a question that's kind of deep. She's saying, I understand that we have a purpose, and my daughter had a purpose, I suppose, in changing my life and others. But really, what's the purpose of a child passing? Wouldn't they have had more purpose to go to stay here and share? So maybe you have some insight into that you could tell people about.
Yeah. So, and I know there's a lot of your shining light parents who feel like they're working with their kids, and their kids are working with them from the other side. So even though they might not be physically here, their soul, their spirit is still connecting with you, giving you nudges, maybe even more fully communicating with you. But I think they're still working from the other side. And sometimes they have even greater power over there than they might have over here. And I had a friend, and she's not a part of Helping Parents Heal, but I had a friend a few years ago who had her son pass away at 7 days old. And that son, as devastating as that was, opened up her to say, you know what, the relationship I'm in right now is not a good one for me. And he was able to teach her that, and she was able to then go on with her life, find someone else who was a fit for her in terms of her life and her love, and was able, then she looks back at that obviously tragedy, but says her son opened her up to a new life that she really needed to understand and live herself. So that 7-day-old baby, she will say to this day, had probably the most powerful and profound purpose in her life, and still is obviously a part of her life. But that tragedy is one that she looks back now on as one that she needed in terms of her growth and finding a better fit for who she wanted to spend the rest of her life with.
Well, and I just want to say that those beautiful babies, I have a daughter who obviously Chelsea passed when she was 2 days old. They grow up in heaven, but we will certainly recognize them when we get there. And so my daughter Chelsea was the first one to meet Morgan when he transitioned, and he actually grabbed her hand and brought her, or she grabbed his hand and brought him to me. So I think that they do have an enormous amount of purpose. And I think that we don't understand it right now. There are so many things that we just think are so unfair and that just shouldn't have happened. But I think that we're all going to understand as soon as we get over there. So I also have another question here, and I don't know what you feel about reincarnation, but Deborah is asking, if a soul reincarnates into a physical body, is that soul able to connect then? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So in looking at NDEs, if you ask them, I believe the stat is about 70% of them do believe that there is reincarnation. So it is a pretty strong feeling from those who've been to the other side that this is not necessarily our only go round, and that we've had probably opportunities before this and may have more ahead of us. And I know a lot of the parents are like, I do not want to go through this again for sure. But it is, as I said, about 70%. So the question again, if you wouldn't mind repeating.
So the question is, when they reincarnate, are they able to connect with their parents being reincarnated? But I think that the main answer is that our soul exists in many places at the same time. And I think you believe that as well. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, those are hard ones to really understand, but it is one that one of my 10 lessons is trust completely that there is some kind of method to this madness, even though we cannot understand it from this perspective in this human brain. But as you said, Elizabeth, when we get to the other side, somehow all this somehow makes some sense.
I think that we're all going to understand so much better, and we're all going to be great friends when we get over there. And there are so many people saying that this has been so helpful, Jeff, because being able to understand from a perspective of someone who's studied so many near-death experiences is very helpful to everyone in the group. I want to thank you. And I also just want to mention that Joe McQuillan is on here as well. Joe is also going to be speaking at the conference. So I just wanted to say hi. And Joe's son passed, Christopher passed. He's written 2 books about Christopher. And so it's really great to have men speaking about this subject, because I think that a lot of times men come from their religious beliefs from a very come at their religious beliefs from a very analytical viewpoint. And so having you and having Joe, just regular guys, I would say, but also fabulous and very evolved now, but who have discovered this and are able to talk about it so eloquently is just wonderful. And we truly appreciate it. Let's see. So we have people saying this has been a wonderful session. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bernie is saying, Jeff, thank you. That was really beautiful. I was having a bad day and you'd made me feel so much better. Thank you. So I just want to say thank you. actually up to 6 o'clock now, or 8 o'clock, or 9 o'clock. Eastern.
I do want to give a shout out to all my soul peeps. I see some of them on the cameras, people who've been in our groups before. So great to see you guys, and much love to all of you.
Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. And we always ask everyone to unmute themselves and say thank you and good night.
Good
And
night, Jeff. This was great.
Thank you, Jeff. This
See
is
you next month.
wonderful.
And
Thank you and good night. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
Thank you, Gary.
have a wonderful evening,
Yep.
everyone.
See you Thursday night.
Good night.
Joe.
Thank you.
Good night.
See you all in Arizona.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you again.
Goodbye. Thanks, Jeff. This was a great presentation.
I hope everything goes well for her.
Good night.